All right, guys. Hey, what is going on? Welcome back to another Antler and AFCO Podcast, the podcast for new and adult onset hunters. My name's Vince. I'm going to be your host, and this is a show where I, a newer, less experienced hunter, like to bring on guys who know a whole heck of a lot more about hunting, or really anything that has to do with the hunting world that we're all in. And I bring guys on who know a lot more than I do. And as I'm asking them questions and learning the new things that I want to learn, I just pass them right along to you guys via this show. So this week, I'm really excited for our guest. If you guys have been following along with me, you know that I have CTS photography going on. That's kind of my newest passion is photography. Actually, I like it a whole heck of a lot more than all the rest of the stuff I'm doing. So I'm really excited to have this week's guest on. He is, let's just say, a pretty darn good photographer in the outdoor space. He has made his way there. So I'm really excited to talk to him about photography, but he's also a huge conservationist, very, very passionate about conserving our public lands. Him and his brother are the owners of Public Land Tees. He is the owner of an awesome bus, an awesome 4x4 van. Let's see, what else is he? He's a hunter too. I mean, just put the cherry on top. All right, guys, well, help me welcome to the show, Sam Soholt. Sam, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. Like we were talking off camera, I am really new into photography. I'm really passionate. And so right now, talking to a guy like you, it's almost like, oh, this is the greatest. Because in my opinion, especially in the outdoor world, you're one of the best photographers out there. And that's not just to like kiss your butt because you're on the show, but you really are. You do amazing work. But it doesn't just stop there. Like all the stuff that you do with conservation, which we'll get into later, is just awesome. It's great for the hunting community. It's great for guys like me who are newer, who are like, well, I like the idea of conservation, but I don't really practically know what that means for me. Mm-hmm. What can I do? And you offer millions of different ways that you can get active in conservation for our public lands, for all of our game species, things like that. And then on top of all that, you got a pretty sweet bus and a pretty cool van. So I got a lot of questions for you. Like I said, I'm going to try to not be super selfish and just ask you photography. We'll get into hunting and conservation and all that other stuff as well. But yeah, thanks a lot for coming on. Usually I start my shows off with a quick prayer, and then we will hop right into what I got for you.
Sound good? Yeah.
All right, man. Lord Jesus, I thank you for just another opportunity to record a podcast. I thank you for just as much as we like to sit back and think that you're in control of everything, but you don't really care about a podcast. You don't really care about the hobbies that we have, the things that we do. But really you do. I mean, you have blessed me with just the desire to do this show, the desire to help other new hunters, the desire to chase and keep working at something that can be pretty frustrating sometimes. And you've also provided just great guest after great guest. And, with that, I thank you for Sam. I thank you for his life and all the things that you've worked out in his life to get him where he's at. Obviously, he has worked his butt off to get there. And, they're all great gifts from you. I think a lot of times you put things in front of us and you don't necessarily give them to us. You make us work for them. But I thank you for everything that you've done in his life. And I thank you for his time coming on here. I know we're all living very busy lives, so just the fact that he's willing to spend an hour or so with me to talk about all this awesome stuff that you have created, I'm just very thankful for that. And of course, I thank you for your son. I thank you that he came down and he died on the cross and died the death that we deserve. He paid a price we could have never paid. And because of that, we get to enjoy your creation. So we thank you for Jesus, and we ask that you would be over this conversation, as you always are. And we ask all this in Jesus' great name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So I don't even know where to start. I wanted to kick right off into either talking about the sweet van or photography, but I think before we get there, I want to kind of get an idea of, I always like to know how people or who people were before they were the people that we know. There's a lot of big social media. I don't want to call it social media. There's the big names in the industry that we all know and love and follow. I like to know how they became that person. So kind of before we get into it, where did your outdoors journey start? Where did you grow up? How did you get into just enjoying being outdoors? And I assume hunting, and then transitioning into starting doing photography for the outdoor space. How did that all start for you?
Basically, as far back as I can remember. Grew up in a family that spent a lot of time in the outdoors. Had a dad that was passionate about hunting. And when we weren't hunting, we were doing something outside. It was fishing or whatever, cruising around, doing stuff in the woods. And then, if it wasn't that, it was sports. But it was, grew up in the Dakotas, was born in South Dakota, grew up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and then chose college based on proximity to good waterfowl hunting. So I went to North Dakota State. And so...
smart move.
Yeah.
Smart move.
And then I'm actually currently a North Dakota resident. Did a little bit of bouncing around there for a while. But yeah, basically my journey has been, from the day I was born, has been somewhat revolving around, the outdoors. And even when I wasn't in the outdoors doing what I wanted to do, I was thinking about it. It was always waiting for Friday to head to the lake, or always waiting for Friday that we're going to go duck hunting, in some little slough that we had hunted the weekend before. Or whatever it was. It was always waiting to get back to it. So, my journey into it has been forever, but kind of transitioned, growing up, I was always interested in the film side of things, having a little handy cam, I had a little Canon, whatever, tape camera. And, we had it was high 8 tapes or something like that. They were, it was before that, and then a whole over the shoulder VHS one before that. And, but a lot of that was, filming wakeboarding and snowboarding and whatever, rollerblading videos with my buddies, in the neighborhood, and recorded a few hunts, but it wasn't really, didn't dive into it all that much. But I always had that interest, and my parents made a deal with us when we were pretty young, actually, that if we didn't drink until we were 21 years old, we could pick out a shotgun. And so
that's pretty good, pretty smart on their part.
Yeah. So it was, so my older brother didn't drink till he was 21, got a Beretta AL391 Technies edition with the beautiful stock and the whole thing.
Yeah.
Pretty sweet autoloader. So, I watched him kind of go through that journey of not drinking until legal age. And so I was like, well, obviously he did it. So now I can't, I can't screw that up. So, but I didn't, I had my old trusty Browning BPS with a 30-inch barrel, so I didn't really need a shotgun when I turned 21. And so I'd asked my dad if we could split, for around the same cost that he spent on that shotgun. I'd asked for a professional video camera, but that was double the cost of what my brother's gun was. So I split it with him. So I saved quarters and change and extra dollars, that I wasn't spending on, food at whatever in college. I saved up, and we split a Canon XH-A1S, which I promptly put on the shelf in my college room because I had no idea how to run it, and still wasn't passionate enough about it to really figure it out on my own. But I continued to hunt, and my first year of archery hunting was in 2010. My brother had talked me into, I'd gone out and hung out with him on a elk hunt and went home and bought a bow and started shooting all summer. And I ended up killing 2 deer within 10 days that first fall. And so I was all jacked up, I was, watching hunting shows and, was still had this idea in the back of my mind that I wanted to work for a hunting show or have a hunting show or whatever. And another friend of mine had sent me an episode of Midwest Whitetail, which at the time was only 2 years old. I think their first season was 2008 or 2009. And so, fall of 2010, I emailed the show and, was like, hey, I wonder if you ever need interns for whatever. And Bill emailed me back a couple hours later. And I went down over Christmas break that year and met up with him at the Subway and did an interview at the office. And then, got an internship with Midwest Whitetail. So it was, I never really, I got undergrad and then went on to get my master's because I was in track. And so I had in a 5th year of eligibility for track and field. And I was like, well, I might as well get a master's while I'm here. But when I was finishing up my master's, I took an internship with Midwest Whitetail. And then after that, I just kind of snowballed it into more and more video and photography gigs. And I never had a real job, I guess.
Yeah. Did you in college, what did you major in? What are your degrees in? Was it videography and photography type stuff?
Definitely not. So I got an undergrad and master's in business administration.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So went the business route. My mom wanted me to go to school to be an engineer. And I was actually I had the option to switch my major when I was going in to be, I was going to do industrial engineering. And when I talked to enrollment, they were like, well, you have more scholarship dollars if you stay in the School of Business. You could do your generals for a year or 2 years, and still take some of the classes you need for the engineering side. And then if you decide to switch, you can switch. So I had, I took obviously going to take the extra scholarship dollars if it didn't make a difference at the beginning. And then I just never switched. I just stayed in the line of business and got a master's.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's good. Like, I'm sure it's helped you kind of in the background of the stuff that you do with like public land tees and all that other stuff. Cause I mean, I don't know anything about any of that stuff. And I'm, you first start all that out and you're like looking at getting an LLC and then trying to set up like, okay, how do you run a business? And I'm like, I don't know, which is probably why I'm not super successful with it. But
I think the biggest thing that I learned through all of it was kind of the structure of a business. So putting together an actual business plan, whether you look at it ever again or not, when you can sit down and kind of write out like what your mission statement is, what your plan of attack is going forward, what you're thinking as far as like marketing, whether it be for yourself or for the business, or and having kind of at least a framework of what you're trying to do. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. They get all these ideas in their head and they never really put it on paper. They never put it into a structure where you can actually follow something. And then above and beyond that, what grad school really taught me was jumping through hoops, because that's all it felt like. It felt like it was just this massive. I mean, it was a pain in the ass. Anybody who's done grad school can attest to that. It's a giant pain. But I think it taught me that, like, as long as you continue to move forward, even if there's parts of it that suck, it gets better on the other side. So you just got to go through, check all those boxes, get all the stuff done that needs to be done in the background, and all the things that people don't see, so that you can go do all of the things that people actually see.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched my wife. She's, I think, one class or something away from finishing her master's. And I'm just like, I don't know. It's because she's taken a lot of classes where it seems like she's already learned all that stuff. And then they make you go do a bunch of random crap that nobody has time for to do. And it doesn't seem like it even applies to what you're studying. But damn it, at the end of it, you're going to get this sheet of paper.
Yeah, it's a whole wax on, wax off thing, man. It doesn't make sense in the moment, but yeah, you can think back on that and be like, well, if I can get through that, I can get through anything.
Yeah, and that's one common thing, because I think, as time has gone on and, all of the different opinions on the education system and stuff, like currently, the one underlying thing that I hear from people who, I know a lot of people who get degrees in X and they get a job in Y and they never use the degree that they went to school for.
Yep.
But they always say the same thing. It taught me how to grind and work even when I didn't want to.
Yep.
And I mean, that is definitely something that, the discipline to, you want to go party, you're in college, you want to do this and that. This stuff that you're studying sucks and it's not fun, but it makes you do it anyway.
Yep.
So yeah, and that, stuff like that those traits carry over into every other part of your life. So, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, the degree is the degree, but the other things you're learning underneath it that you can apply universally are really, really where you win out. But
yep.
So you got on with Midwest Whitetail. Now, did you have more of an interest? When did you really like pick up a camera for photography, or have you always been more interested in the videography side of it?
Yeah, so growing up, I always wanted to do the video thing. That was always, what piqued my interest the most. And when I started working for Midwest Whitetail, it was right at the time when DSLRs started to film, have like video capability. You know, it's kind of like that crossover point where, okay, you could get full HD video out of a, pretty inexpensive Canon DSLR. And so when we were dealing with, guys sending pro staff video in, we still, any of them that had a DSLR, we were trying to encourage them to use that for cutaways, for interviews, all the stuff that wasn't the kill shot, because it just gave that depth of field. It gave you this different look than a standard video camera. And while we were doing that, obviously, like, okay, well, we need to snap photos for if it's a social post or whatever it was at the time, like a thumbnail for the video.
Right.
We started to snap photos with these DSLRs, and, I kind of started to learn that a little bit. And then after my time at Midwest Whitetail, I actually, let's see how it went. I bought a bow because the show was sponsored by Hoyt. So I had bought a Hoyt Rampage XT, gone down there, hunted with it. I moved to Colorado to work in my brother's archery shop and backcountry hunting store, and I traded the bow for a gun. And then we sold, he had a little gun shop, so we sold the gun and then used that money to buy a Canon 7D. and so I was using that and the Canon XH-A1S that I had, both of those, to film and shoot photos, and started shooting a lot more photos that fall, 2012, I guess it would have been. And then it just kind of like, as I continued to shoot photos, I started to get more interested in that. And I think putting the puzzle pieces together, like I would see somebody's photo, in the field or whatever, or some, a star shot or whatever, astrophotography or whatever it might be. And I would try to figure out, like, how did they shoot that photo? So I spent countless hours on YouTube trying to like research different photography techniques and, shutter drag and doing all these different things. And, it'd be like, it would come to me at the most random time. Like I'd be fletching arrows in the back or whatever and be like, oh, that's how they got that shot. Like I'd like just, it was just constantly working through in my brain. And so as that, like, kind of skill developed, I started to fall in love with the photography side more, because I thought that challenge of trying to like tell a story with a single image was such a cool, like, quest, I guess, if you will.
Right.
And then I continued to film. I moved from Colorado. I got a job as a sales rep. I moved to Montana. And I was working on my sales rep job. I was sitting in a coffee shop, and a guy was on the phone talking about video production. And after he got off the phone, I was like, hey man, I just overheard you talking about video. Like, what are you up to? And he's like, oh, I'm doing a video for Museum of the Rockies, but my main gig is a producer of a hunting show. And I was like, oh, funny you mentioned that, because I just got done, like working for a hunting show. I was like, if you ever need to, we exchanged information, because I was actually trying to sell a camera at the time, that Canon video camera, because I could see that the tape camera and everything, it was going to go, it was going to the wayside. So we exchanged info. I sold my camera. I sent him a message, like, hey, thanks for the tip, because I'd posted it at the film school on Montana State's campus, and somebody bought it from me. And he was like, hey, thanks for reaching out. Like, we're actually doing a bear hunt in Alaska. Like, I need a second shooter. Have you ever run the Sony EX1? And I had at Midwest Whitetail. So I was like, yeah, for sure. And so 3 weeks later, I was up in Alaska filming a bear hunt, which then led to filming for the Coast Guard, for Coast Guard Alaska, show for the Weather Channel. And then that led to filming for a bear hunting show for the History Channel called The Hunt. So I lived on Kodiak for like 5 months.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it was just like, and then through that, I just kept shooting more and more photos and really developed kind of, not my style yet, but like just an eye for it. And one of the people that I was filming saw that, and they hired me for my first professional photo shoot.
Good deal. So I'm kind of curious, when you start bringing it up, because like I said, anybody who knows you, obviously we associate you with hunting and wildlife. Mm-hmm. What is kind of the most like furthest away from that you've worked on in terms of shooting for a show? Like you had mentioned the Coast Guard, or is that kind of the weirdest thing? Have you always been pretty dialed into the outdoor space, or have you done some other things as you've been coming up? Like, produced a flower show one, you know what I mean? Like, what's kind of the stuff that you cut your teeth on outside of that?
I shot about 4 houses of real estate photography when I was getting into it in Colorado. And then probably the Coast Guard show is probably like the furthest away from hunting that I've ever filmed. You know, to film in search and rescues for the Coast Guard, so it really has nothing to do with that outdoor space.
Right.
But which was great. You know, I learned a ton about like actually producing a docuseries and figuring, you know, like how they actually put that together and how much footage you need to like tell the story of what, you know, they're trying to portray. But yeah, I think, you know, other than that, it's been always just pretty focused on that niche market of the hunting industry.
And did you ever have any like really big mentors in that? Because how do you even begin to learn? Like, if you were to tell me, you know, we're gonna have an archery event, I want you to just take pictures. That's pretty easy. Mm-hmm. You know, especially like, okay, I'm an archer, I hunt. You kind of have an idea of what people would like to see and how you can compose shots and stuff like that. But when you cut over into like the video side of things, where did you learn how to like put all that together? Because I'm not real big at, like, the most video that I really do is either just quick Instagram things or like this podcast, which is very, I'm talking, you're talking, yep. I'm talking. But when you get into like having to do B-roll and having to, you know, just put together a show, where did you learn to do all that?
That was definitely Midwest Whitetail. So, you know, I had to produce a show every single week for the Michigan series, and then helped produce the Minnesota series. So, you know, throughout the course of the fall, you're looking at, I think it was like 27 or 28 episodes total. You know, and so you start to, you know, and the guys that I really learned from as far as like making sure you had enough footage was like guys like Aaron Warburton and really Greg Clements, who now, you know, they're both the hunting public at this point. But Greg was probably the best as far as like someone to learn from for like building a story, because that was his craft. You know, like he's always been the guy that like really like dove into being like a student of the craft, like as far as like video and like telling a story and like getting different angles and shooting B-roll and doing all the things that you need to be able to fill in so like people can feel like they're there. So I learned that whole story side of things from Midwest Whitetail, and then just integrated that into everything I've done since.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because you had mentioned like, how do you know you're getting enough footage? And that's something that I think that's part of the reason why I've gravitated. It's great that my camera can do 4K video, but it's like I'm almost intimidated to try to put together some sort of video. At least like you were saying with a picture, I can take time. I can try to figure out how to tell that story with one shot, and I feel more natural with that. But yeah, I go out hunting. I always joke with people, I'm like, I'm the worst content creator ever, because I go hunting and like I'm focused on hunting, and I come back and I have like half of a video of where I started like saying what I was doing and then didn't even finish it. And I'm like, I got nothing to show anybody.
And then you've got 3 or 4 clips like from like, here's a leaf blowing in the wind, and here's a the whole 17-second video is all like bad B-roll that's not even in focus. So I'm curious. Go ahead. I was just going to say, it definitely takes a different level of patience. If you think you have patience just as a hunter, like add a camera into it and try to like capture what you're doing in the moment, but still be focused on like completing the task that you're there to do. It's I have a hard time. I have a hard time getting into that, even though I've been doing it for a long time, and it's still like, oh, son of a bitch, I gotta set up the tripod, or you know, like go back and walk this again, or do this, and you know, it takes time.
Have you ever like monumentally screwed up a hunt or anything by like you had to go back and reshoot something, or you know, you forgot to set something up properly to get whatever your shot is? Have you ever screwed anything up like trying to get it set up?
I mean, yeah, have certainly, I've double punched a few times, you know, so I don't get the kill shot on film or whatever. Hasn't happened it's never happened to me like while I'm on a shoot getting paid for a shoot. Which is lucky. You know, I've done it
while you're still getting paid to shoot.
Right. You know, so like there's a there's been times where I've hunted with my brother where we tried to film stuff and do some things, and him and I have fairly different hunting styles, and so like sometimes like just in the moment, like I do something different than he's gonna do or whatever, and I've double punched a couple times on stuff like that, and I don't think I can't say that I've ever like monumentally screwed up a shot. There was one time that I was close to I was filming a mountain lion hunt in British Columbia, and they let the dogs loose, and it was whatever mile and a half in there or whatever. And so, you're trudging through the snow and it's cold and I'm sweating and whatever. And I'd gotten snow, like there was a record button on top of the handle, and the snow and ice had built up around the record button. And so I was recording this cat in the tree, and it's right before the guy is about to shoot. And then I just record is on, the cat's in the tree, framing's good, everything's good. And then I just watched the record stop. And so then, shit. So I had to like hammer on the record button again and push it, like jam it through the ice to get it to record again.
Oh, geez.
And like he shot either right before it ended or right after. I can't remember which way it was, but there was probably like 3/4 of a second that I didn't get on film of like the most critical part of that whole thing. Yeah. And thankfully there was another shooter there. So like they were able to like cut, to the other shooter's camera. Yeah. Like, so, but like, oh man, that was stressful, like just having that happen in the moment.
Now, do they typically, when you guys go out for things like that, do you typically work with other, like how many guys are shooting at one time? Cause maybe that's one of the reasons why it seems so hard to put together decent content when you're by yourself, because you always look at like the, really highly produced things where it's you cut from this angle and then it's this angle. It's like, how the hell did they do that?
Yeah, it's definitely. So a lot of time, not a lot, but like I've done a fair bit with 2 shooters. I don't think I've ever been on any shoots with more than that. But it, once you kind of get into the flow with having a second shooter, like, between the two of you, you can cover it all pretty well. And then it just adds so much to the story, being able to, basically cover that 180 degrees, and make sure that they can cut back and forth between, if there's whatever better background or better audio or whatever, between the two.
So this is gonna be my last photography question. Then I'll talk about conservation, which with everyone who's listening to this point's like, Jesus Christ, get to it already. What do you have any other styles of photography that you enjoy doing? Like for instance, I like to do, like when we were at Total Archery Challenge, I like to capture those moments of, when someone's got their bow drawn about to shoot, but I also really enjoy macro photography. I don't have a true macro lens yet, so it's kind of with the lens that I have, I get about as close as I can, but like that's something I really enjoy as well. Do you have anything else? Like I've noticed you seem to take a lot of like really cool shots of the sky and things like that. What else are you interested in terms of photography?
Yeah, I would say I'm a big fan of like landscape stuff. I think it allows you to set the scene, like especially with social media stuff now. If you can kind of take that photo that like tells like the broad space of like the type of country you're in, and then dive in and be, and then like, if it's a series of story posts, if you can have one where it's like this cool wide angle shot of mountains or like a long logging road or whatever it is, people can kind of like see that and like, okay, I understand the country that he's spending time in. And then following that up, you start to dive in and get all these textures, so you're like shooting tighter shots of everything that's happening. And I think people see that first image and they're like, oh, I know where all of this is happening. And I kind of put all that together. So yeah, I really like shooting landscapes. And, last fall started getting more into like the stacked focus photography with landscapes. And so you have basically, you start and you stack a series of 7 to 15 images of changing the focus out. And so like if anybody looks at the photo, like that rock in the very foreground is in focus as well as the clouds like on the landscape. And that turns out pretty cool. It kind of gives this very surreal look to the landscape, but it's cool.
Now I assume that's much more, in my minimal understanding of photography, you would close your aperture, or this is where I get confused. The more you close your aperture, the higher you go in the number, that's going to kind of bring everything more into focus versus like having my 55 all the way down to 1.8.
Right.
Does it give it a much more, even a different feel than shooting like
a
real tight aperture?
So if you said it exactly right. So if you're shooting if it's a f1.8 to f22, if you shoot at f22, obviously a lot more of the scene is in focus. But this takes it to the next level where you would shoot wide open. So you'd shoot at 1.8. I do a lot at 1.4, because I can stack a whole bunch of photos. But basically, you just incrementally just move it out. So it'd be like, you have 1 inch of the frame is in focus every time you move it, and then it blends all those together, and it creates it's like almost a full focus depth of field look. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a strange way to put it. I started following a landscape photographer guy, and he was doing a bunch of stuff in the Colorado Rockies last fall of like all the aspen leaves and different stuff.
Yeah.
And so you'd have like one aspen leaf like on a log in focus in front of you, and then like that would grab your attention. Then you as you look at it, you're like, oh, that that 2-track road that's full of aspen leaves is also in focus, and then that crotch of that tree perfectly frames that mountain that's also in focus. And so
that's cool.
It gives it like almost looks like a painting kind of feel to it.
That's pretty neat. I'm gonna have to mess around with that.
Yeah, and it's really cool for doing product stuff too, because if you're shooting, like let's say you have like a handgun laid out on a table or whatever, and you still you want the whole gun to be in focus, but like you still want other parts of it to be blurred out. You can kind of use that stack and get the whole gun in focus, and so that grabs your eye, and then have the rest be blurred out. That's
pretty cool.
Yep.
I lied. I do have one more question. This is what my buddy, I was talking to my buddy before the show. I'm like, you have any questions? Because he's kind of just getting into it as well.
Sure.
His question was, for a newer person, what is the number one lens that you recommend for someone beyond the kit lens that comes with the camera? What is the best all-encompassing lens that you should get next?
All-encompassing.
Now I know that's I'm sure it definitely depends on what you plan to shoot.
Right. Yeah.
But,
and that's the main thing. But I would say, like everyone's second lens typically beyond the kit lens is the nifty 50.
That was mine.
Yeah. So you get an inexpensive 50 millimeter, with a pretty fast, aperture f1.8 or whatever. And it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg, but you can do a lot of cool photos, with that. I would say the other one, if you can get it for pretty inexpensive, is a wide angle, and kind of change up that look and be able to tell more of that story in a, like way more, kind of skew out the frame, if you will. But you can there's a lot of like third-party lenses. You don't have to go with a Sony or a Canon lens or whatever you're shooting on. And I've shot a lot with a Rokinon. It was a full manual, so like there was no autofocus. You had to adjust focus and aperture on the lens itself. But it was like $290 or something like that. And I've had more of those photos like published in magazines with that cheap lens than I have with a $3,000, 70 to $200.
Right.
So it's I would say either, a nifty 50 for $99 or, go with like a 14 millimeter or something in that range.
All right, guys, let's take a quick break to go through the friends of the show. First and foremost, we have More Innovations. More Innovations is an awesome 3D printing company. They are making equipment that goes on your bow press, little caddies, things like that, to keep track of all of your tools and your thread and your parts so you're not losing those. They have wall mount quivers like I got right behind me over here, so you can keep your arrows in the wall, whether it's in the garage or in your shooting shed, whatever it may be. And then they also have, this is one of my favorite things. I always talk about that grenade pen holder, and the 5-arrow pocket quiver. He's just got a lot of really cool 3D printed things that are really great tools for us as archers to have. Check out moreinnovations.com. Use code all caps AFCO10. That will get you 10% off over at More Innovations. Secondly, we got Adams Precision Archery. They are basically just killing it. They came out today with it's like a halftone comic book feel wrap that they did on a build, and it is just awesome. So if you're in the market for a new set of arrows, check out adamsprecisionarchery.com. If you use code all caps AFCO10, That's going to save you 10% off on your arrow build. Let him know if you want to do the fanny pack, you can do that as well. But that comic book wrap they put out, that's pretty sweet too. So check it out at adamsprecisionarchery.com. Thirdly, Buzzard Roost saddles. It is the most adjustable, most comfortable saddle that your butt will ever sit in. Get yourself one now, whether you're new to saddle hunting and you want to try one out, or you've been saddle hunting for a while and you're just not quite happy with yours. Buzzard Roost will be the most comfortable saddle that you sit in. You can sit in it from an hour to 8 hours, doesn't matter. Any adjustment you need to make, you can make it, and you're back in the game. Go to buzzardroostsaddles.com and use code AAFP10 for 10% off your saddle over at buzzardroostsaddles.com. Our Grounds Coffee Co., still the official coffee of the AFCO podcast, and they are back at it, guys. The roaster's in. Ed is gearing up to start putting coffee back out to the masses. I'm super excited for that. So make sure you guys keep an eye out when that coffee starts coming back out. Until then, continue to help him out. Buy merch. Go to the website. Help him out however you can. If you want to use code all caps AFCO, that's going to save you 15% at ourgroundscoffeeco.com. Quick Camo, Quick Camo. I use their stuff during turkey season, so if you are looking for a leafy suit, they have hats with masks that are already built into them that I really liked during turkey season. They've also got really great gloves, great quality gloves. You can get fingerless, you can get touchscreen gloves. I bought the touchscreen, ended up cutting the fingers off, but either way, their quality is great. It's just a great equipment to have in your toolbox for when you're out in the woods. So check out quickcamo.com. If you use code all caps AFCO10, that'll get you 10% off at Quick Camo. And finally, Pursuit Energy. Guys, Pursuit Energy is the #1 hunting branded energy drink. It tastes great. It gives you the energy you need. My favorite is personally the Zero Orange. I'm just a big orange fan. But whether you like the zero stuff, zero sugar, or if you like stuff with the sugar, either way, they got you covered. They have a bunch of really great flavors. My second favorite is grape, but go on the website, go to pursuitenergy.com. You can either buy them in 4 or 8 packs, I believe, or you can sign up for the subscription so that it just gets sent to your door, whatever time frame you choose, and then you don't even got to worry about ordering it every month. So check out pursuitenergy.com. Get yourself hooked up with Pursuit and fuel your pursuit. So guys, that is it for the friends of the show. Let's hop back into the conversation with Sam Soholt. Good deal.
Yep.
All right, now let's get into something else that you're very passionate about, conservation. Mm-hmm. So I've got plenty of questions about that. I'm curious, when did you first start feeling like this was something that you really wanted to focus on? Obviously, you're very, very passionate. I mean, that it's almost in terms of like what I see on social media from you, that's just as big of a deal of what you do than your career as a photographer and videographer. When did that passion start and why?
Yeah, so that really kind of kicked off in 2016. And the reason is because we were on a path that could have potentially led to losing massive amounts of our public land. And I'll tell it in a real short way. There's a lot more facets to it, and like different avenues that we could go down. But basically, what the federal government was doing at the time, or the political party that was running for office, that in 2016, they were trying to market the issue as a states' rights issue. So they were trying to put this really pretty bow on it, saying we want to transfer all of these federally managed public lands to the states, because the states have better control and can act faster and have a better idea of what's going on their lands in the state than what the federal government can do. Now, I wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment. I appreciate states' rights, and I would much rather we have more control at the state level than the federal level, because in almost all aspects, it's better for the people who live in the state if the state can make more decisions, right? I'm all about small government, less taxes. I'm very fiscally conservative. But when it comes to land management, the states, long story short, the states typically cannot afford to manage massive amounts of public land, especially when it comes to things like wildfire, natural disaster, anything that draws tons of money into like needing to take care of that land. And so what happens is if you transfer land to the state, and we did it during the Homestead Act, we did it during, there's a lot of times where the federal government transferred land to the states, and almost all of that has become privatized. So basically what it was a fast track to privatization. And I'd, obviously I'd make a living on spending time on public land. I, have done tons of hunts on public land. I've done photography and video, and I've done all these things and used our public land system as this launch pad for massive amounts of recreation, as well as millions of people in the country. And so when it was coming down the pipe that we might lose a bunch of this land, I was like, well, obviously that doesn't sit right with me. What can we do about it? And the answer to that was make lots of noise, collectively as sportsmen and women, whether you hunt, fish, bike, hike, kayak. I mean, if you do anything in outdoor recreation, you had something to lose. And so it kind of turned into this project. I had hit a lot of the goals that I had in photography, which, cover photos, shooting for the brands that I wanted to shoot for, traveling, doing all these different things. And so I was like, okay, always looking for the next project. What's the next, what's the next thing? Well, this idea for a hunting school bus didn't stem from the public land side of things, but it was, my brother had talked about using a school bus for his shop as could have been a marketing tool, or maybe turn one into a mobile archery shop that they could have traveled. His shop was in Fort Collins, so could have gone up to Laramie one night a week and worked on people's bows. And it kind of bounced around these different ideas of what you could do with it. And the last thing was we'll just use it on a turkey tour, take all the seats out, throw some bunk beds in there. It's got pretty good clearance, plenty of room to sleep. And, so this idea of buying a bus and converting it into a hunting shack, kind of just stuck in the back of my brain. And every time I'd see a yellow school bus, oh, that could be cool. That could be cool. And so fall of 2016, started the search for a bus. And I was still in this moment. I was still trying to figure out, okay, what's the story? What's the what do you use a bus for that'll actually gain attention, that'll actually get people engaged in what you're doing with it? And I was actually on a long drive and do a lot of good thinking on long drives between hunts. Oh, yeah. And started thinking about the public land issue and everything BHA was doing and trying to raise awareness about all this stuff. And different, Randy Newberg was talking about it a lot. And just all these different people were really starting to make a lot of noise about these issues. I was like, well, what if you use it as a giant billboard to raise awareness about public land issues and get people fired up about actually doing something? And so I called Josh, my older brother, and I was like, hey, what about this? Do you think, this would actually get people engaged? And both of us kind of came to the conclusion, that is the avenue that you go down in the bus to get people involved in the story. Mm-hmm. And so, we were both looking, and I found he found one on Craigslist out in Colorado, and it fit the bill for everything that I needed. I had actually thought I had bought one in Iowa. I was going to trade a gun and $1,500 for it or something. Really?
I
was trying to barter with people, and he found this one, and it was $5,500, and I talked him down to $3,500. And on New Year's Eve,
for an entire school bus?
Oh man, yeah, and 20,000 miles before I bought it, the school district had rebuilt the motor and transmission on their dime.
Really?
Yeah. So I got, when I bought it, it was 180,000 miles on the chassis, but completely rebuilt motor and tranny, Cat 3116 motor with an Allison transmission, and so I had a pretty solid rig for $3,500.
Right.
And this was also at a time before the schooly Sprinter van, whatever explosion. And so, I think, two things would have happened. Had I bought the bus 4 years later, I probably would have been known worldwide. I was just right a little bit too early for this craze of everybody buying them and building them out. But it was the perfect timing because diesel wasn't that expensive. Buses weren't that expensive. Lumber wasn't that expensive. Had I bought this right before the pandemic, I would have never came out alive.
Right.
No, so yeah, bought the bus New Year's Eve 2016 and kind of started down this journey of converting the bus and, like really like I kept like kind of teasing like what I was going to do with the bus. And then it wasn't until, like right towards the end of that summer of 2017 when I was doing the build that I kind of like leaked, and had like my buddy film a couple videos about like what the project was about. And then from there, like, got on a bunch of websites and had to deal with Outdoor Life to create some content for them or whatever. And then that's really when it started to gain traction, for lack of better terms, and basically lived out of the school bus for 2.5 years talking about public lands and hunting and fishing on public land, and just lived one giant adventure after another for almost 3 years.
Man, that's all. I remember the first time I saw that, and I don't know if it was either on the Hunting Public or maybe it was like the next video after watching a Hunting Public thing. And I was like, what in the hell is that? I was like, that is so awesome, because you had like the tent coming off of it and everything. And yeah, so that's cool though, because I didn't know that that was like the backstory to that thing. I kind of thought it was just you for some reason decided to buy a bus and make it into a hunting rig.
Well, that was always like the dream, right? But like in my mind, I could not figure out like, okay, it's just some dude hunting out of a school bus. It's cool. It's cool, but it's a flash. It's a very, and the goal of being somebody who creates content, shooting photos, whatever it is, you're always looking for what is going to be the story that you can actually get other people involved with. Like it's more fun when you have a community built around it. And that's really what it became. It was like this kind of following. People were just like fired up about the bus and like wanted, wanted to learn more, wanted to do more, wanted to get involved, like, wanted it at events. And, it was like, how do we do this? Like, how can I help? How can I raise money? How can I, how do I get involved? It was, so I have no idea how many people have written or called their senators and House of Representatives members, or joined a conservation group or whatever it may be because of this project. But man, I'm pretty proud of kind of where it all went.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great idea. Like I said, it definitely lends itself to, it catches your attention, and then it gives you the platform to kind of like, okay, now, here's what we're here for.
Right.
So I figure there's no better person to explain this than you. For a newer hunter, so this show's generally, it's for newer hunters. I'm a newer adult onset hunter myself. Could you briefly kind of talk about the Pittman-Robertson Act? I think that terminology gets thrown around a lot, especially when we're talking conservation, but I know that like a lot of people may not actually understand what it was or what it is.
Yeah, for sure.
And then what implications it has in our lives that we might not even realize that it does.
Yeah, for sure. And actually one thing I wanted to touch on for people just getting into it is, if you want to get involved in conservation, the biggest thing you can do to start is, it's free, is just educate yourself a little bit. There's lots of good videos, and you'd be like, oh, where do I even start? So I did a 4-part series for Vortex last year that I actually reshared through the course of March this spring. So if anybody goes back in my reels or on the Public Land Tees page, back in our reels, I did one about the duck stamp, one about Pittman-Robertson Act, one about the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and then one I just talked about the 7 tenets of the North American model of conservation. So if if people go back and just learn about those things, you'll get a better understanding of kind of how conservation funding works. But more specifically, the Pittman-Robertson Act, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember the exact year that it was passed, but basically
it was 37, wasn't it?
Yeah, it seems right, because it was right in there
somewhere
around the time of the duck stamp, because duck stamp was in 34, Pittman-Robertson was in 37. So basically what happened is it took an existing tax and it reframed it, reused it for conservation. So the way it works is they imposed a tax on the sale of guns and ammo, and it was later amended to add handguns, archery equipment, different things within that category. And then I'll get to it, but they also added a bill on the fishing side. But the Pittman-Robertson Act specifically is a 11% tax on guns, ammo, and archery equipment, and a 10% tax on handguns. And what that does is it goes into a pot, and then states are able to basically fund a project, and then they can get reimbursed through Pittman-Robertson dollars for the like conservation easements. So whether that be, putting in a dock, or early on it was like docks and access to rivers, but all that comes out of the Dingell-Johnson Act now. But a lot of the money goes towards hunter education, which is a big thing. It goes towards shooting ranges. So anybody out there that spends a lot of money on guns and ammo, but then goes to the range and does a lot of shooting, a lot of those shooting ranges were paid for or are paid for and kept up by Pittman-Robertson dollars. It's used for things like on a much larger scale, whether it be working on wetland habitat or forestry type stuff, or things that the state needs to do to maintain wildlife populations and habitat across the state. And without those dollars, the states wouldn't be able to do really not nearly as much as they are able to because of these matched grants, basically. And the money is distributed based on, I think it's land mass as well as population of hunters, or people that are actually going to, use it.
Right.
And then I forget the percentage of of the project that they can get reimbursed, but there's a certain percentage of the money that the states can get back, and then they can, invest that into another project and then apply for Pittman-Robertson dollars the next year. So it's a pretty amazing system that we have had in place for, I guess, 89 years or whatever now. Yep.
Yeah, that was one thing I remember I've talked to a few people about that, and I'm not going to pretend like I know it to a T, but it's like you talk about conservation and they're like, yeah, I just don't know what to do. And it's like, well, if it makes you feel any better, you don't realize it, but you've already, you bought a bow, you buy ammo, you've bought gun, you're already doing something without even realizing it. What would you say would be the next practical step for somebody? Because obviously it goes towards conservation when we do what we had just talked about. But if you want to actively get involved, what would be your next, this is the next step, the next easy thing you can do to make a difference? Because not everybody's going to always have time to, make it a career or anything like that. And a lot of us too, we're normal people. We don't have thousands of dollars sitting around that I can just be like, you know what? I really like turkey hunting. So here's 50 grand for this place. And here's 50 grand for that. For the normal average guy that just wants to feel like, they want to take a little bit of ownership. I hunt a lot of public ground. And yeah, so what's the next step for me to feel like I'm actually involved, like I'm actively being pursuing conservation?
Yeah. So I would say there's two things. So the first being join a conservation organization. If you have an animal, species, whatever you're passionate about, I guarantee there's an organization that spends time focusing on that. And I think what a lot of people forget is just because you join Pheasants Forever doesn't mean you're not also helping ducks, deer, turkeys. All of that habitat work done by each and every organization is benefiting everything. So, collectively, we're all throwing money at the same thing. It's just I'm really passionate about elk, so I'm going to give my money to Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Yeah. What that does is say it's $35 for a year membership. You get to learn a lot about the organization. Typically, there's discounts and stuff involved with other companies that they partner with. A lot of times you get literature. So whether it's a magazine, if it's RMEF, you get Bugle Magazine. If it's Pheasants Forever, you get, On the Wing. There's just lots of media material that you get, and you get to learn about projects that are going on. So there's volunteer opportunities. There's banquets where you get to know people that are like-minded. And you can go hang out at those and talk about conservation, different things you can do. You can add money into a raffle, and there's a million ways, once you join the organization, to be involved. So do that. Pick one, go join it, figure it out from there. And then on top of that, I would say if you don't want to join an organization, pay attention to, pages like ours, Public Land Tees, or my page. If there's issues that come up, follow all of the conservation organizations, because a lot of time they will have different issues that they are either trying to lobby on behalf of or against, and pay attention to those, because a lot of times there's call outs for reaching out to your representatives. One really good page to follow is howl.org, because a lot of times they'll have, there'll be somebody's brought an anti-hunting bill, or somebody's trying to change something, or we need support for this. And they make it really easy. They'll do a single link, like Oregon bear hunting, and they'll let you, you can click on that. It already has a pre-written message. You can sign your name, send it, and that goes to all however many representatives in that state. And so just staying involved and contacting your representatives is huge, because for every one phone call that a representative gets, they know that there's 1,000 more people out there that are thinking the same thing, that haven't picked up the phone, or haven't wrote a letter, or haven't gotten involved in that way. So it can be a very powerful tool. And there's a lot of us out there that, if we all start doing it, they have to pay attention, because we can pretty easily swing votes.
Yeah. And I think another thing that I've noticed with contacting representatives too, I think a lot of people, it's like you said, Oregon bear hunting. It's like, well, I live in Iowa. So it's like, I guess I don't need to do it. And it's like, yes, you should, and a lot of those things that I've done, it's not like they ask for your address.
Right.
You're sending a letter that you're concerned about something. And so that's one topic, or one thing I wanted to kind of bring up with that is, don't think that just because this particular issue is happening in Oregon or Colorado or wherever it may be, don't think you can't click that link and still send a letter.
Right.
It's better for them to get 5,000 letters, and who cares where you're from? Yeah. They don't really know that. They just know there's 5,000 concerned voices out there. And if you know anything about a politician, they want to keep their job. So, whether they really care or not. Yeah.
And even if you're a non-resident, anybody who understands how hunting dollars work in the state, if they're a representative, understand how important non-residents are. Yeah. Because a lot of times your license cost is 10, 15, 20 times as high as a resident tag. And so they know that, okay, if you're planning an out-of-state hunt, you're coming in to spend $500 on a tag. You're spending $1,000 on lodging. You're spending, $500 to $1,000 on food if it's a group of people. It's this economy booster that they want to keep rolling. And I think that's important for people to understand that, like you said, even if you're not from that state, the more voices we can have in favor of good bills and against bad bills, the better off we'll be.
Yeah, absolutely. So where did public land tees come from? Yeah. How does that fit into the story?
So that fits in right in with the bus. So the same summer that I was working on the bus, Josh, my older brother, and I started working on the concept for public land tees. And it was, one, it's a way to, we were trying to figure out, okay, I do the bus project. How do I can raise awareness, but if you actually want to do some good, we need to put some dollars towards these organizations that are spending all the time in Washington. They're calling senators on a daily basis. They're, working with other groups. They're, and matching grants, dollars, and all these different things. And so we want to figure out a way to give lots of money back to the organizations that are working on it all the time. And so basically, the day that I took off to drive on my first trip in the bus, we launched the website and kicked it out there. And since then, $5 from everything we've ever sold, we donate back to different, we typically try to earmark it for specific projects. So whether it's an access project, and we try to do a lot of access stuff, because that's really the name of the game for what our company was founded on, was not only keeping, but improving access for sportsmen. So, it's the reason we donated $5,000 to that Wyoming corner crossing case to help with legal fees, because that precedent of being able to cross from public to public and not have it be a criminal trespassing is a huge precedent set. Now that is obviously, there's a lot of, different things we need to talk about on that case at some point, but it's a good start in the right direction. And there's a lot more that needs to happen, but we've constantly tried to find things like that are going to move the needle. We donated $5,000 to RMEF a few years back for a Falls Creek project. And obviously our donation wasn't the big donation, but it helped open up a chunk of private, which connected public to public, and it opened up basically easier access to 26,000 acres of public land. So we just kind of always, try to search for stuff like that, so we can kind of further lowering that barrier to entry for new hunters and have more places to hunt.
Yeah, that's awesome. Plus, I mean, your guys' t-shirts and hoodies and everything else, they're awesome anyway.
Well, thank you.
So, I mean, it's not like you got to buy an ugly t-shirt to support the thing. You get a cool t-shirt. Yeah, some of my favorite t-shirts I own are from you guys, just because it's, like I said, you feel good because you know that some of that money's going to conservation. It's a cool design. It fits right in with our lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no, I think that's really awesome. Finally, before I let you go, was the van, does that have anything to do with the story, or you guys just wanted a kick-ass van?
No,
because that thing is...
Yeah, the van was just call it an extension. And so the bus was great, lived out of it for a long time. It is a total pain, I think I probably talked more people out of buying a bus than into buying a bus.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was for the purpose that I was using it for. It was perfect. It was the vehicle. It's a 36-foot billboard to talk about public land. Yeah. As far as like actually getting around and getting into the mountains or getting into the woods further, or actually like driving the speed limit, having air conditioning, all of those things, the van was where it was at. So that one was cool because Josh and I got to do the build together. And obviously got to work with a bunch of cool companies. Quigley 4x4 helped us out with the 4-wheel drive system. So it's a, lifted full 4-wheel drive and then full built out interior. And it was a smaller vehicle, same mission kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah.
So what do you kind of got going on in the future? Do you pretty much, like, is your main thing videography, or like, do you have any cool projects coming up you can talk about, or?
There's always cool projects in the hopper, and trying to figure out like which next one to tackle. At the moment, just kind of getting ready for the fall, like, kind of figuring out hunts and figuring out what content needs to be created around what hunt to, kind of further the mission. But yeah, it's a big season of hunts and just spending time on public land and talking to find people like you about what we're trying to do and, the money we're trying to raise. And just, I think over the next year, I think we'll have some pretty cool things happening. Nothing that's set in stone right now, but just lots of big ideas and, swinging for the fences always.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think you and your brother, you guys have done a great job with what you're doing, and you've done a ton of great work. Like I said, your content's just great to look at. Your photography and videography is great to look at, but you guys have really made a lot of impact on the conservation side and, inspiring people to get involved that may have otherwise not, or they may just not have known how.
Sure.
I think it's very helpful, especially for a newer guy, when you're doing like the stamp it forward thing. Like, that's a very easy, practical thing that you can get involved with. And it doesn't take any, like, I don't have to sit on my end and read a bunch of legislation. I don't have to do this or that. It's very simple.
Yep.
Buy this stamp.
Right. This
is what it's for. And I think that's really great that guys like you are focusing on that, and kind of just making it, like I said, more practical, easier for all of us to get involved on something that, depending on what level you look at it, can get pretty complex. Mm-hmm. And like I said, for the average guy who there's not always that opportunity where you feel like you can make an impact because, like I said, I can't donate $5,000 to RMEF. But you can buy this stamp, you can buy a t-shirt,
Yep.
You can do things that are super simple, and when enough of us do that, make a huge impact overall.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for doing that, because anyone who steps foot on public land, for whatever reason you use it, we do all need to be involved, because otherwise it won't be there, so.
Yep.
Well, for anybody who may not be following you yet, which probably not a ton of them, but for those three to six people who may not have where can they find you guys online? Public Land Tees, you, your brother?
Yeah, so website is publiclandtees.com. So just like, publiclandtees.com. And then if you want to follow us on social, Public Land Tees, both on Instagram, Facebook, whatever. And then my personal is at Sam Soholt. And then Josh's is at Josh Soholt. So, and then we have a YouTube channel called Soholt Brothers that we'll, be throwing more stuff on too as the year goes. I got a couple pretty fun deer hunts to put up there before the season starts, and a bunch of stuff like that of season prep. And, there's always a million things that we should be filming and putting up there, but
I'm always so jealous of guys like when you're like, yeah, I got a couple deer hunts I got to put up. And I'm like, you have leftover deer hunts? Like leftover footage?
Well,
gosh.
Well, both of them happened pretty late last year, and I didn't get around to editing them until now. So, yeah.
I'm terrible with it. I'm the guy that, like, when I finally do film or whatever, get some content together, I have like no impulse control, and I'm like, share it. And then I'm like, shoot, I just shared like a month and a half worth of content in 3 days, and now I'm scraping by.
Yep. It's very easy to do that.
Yeah. Well, hey man, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on here. I appreciate you taking all my terrible photography questions and then enlightening us on conservation, how we can all get involved. So thanks so much for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And if anybody listening has more questions, whether it be related to a schoolie build of your own or a photography question or conservation based, whatever it is, I'm pretty good about responding to all of my messages on social media, or at least I try to. So don't hesitate to reach out, and I'll do my best I can to answer the question.
All right, guys, and make sure you were following along with Sam, his brother Josh, and Public Land Tees, because they're putting out content in really easy, practical ways that we can all get involved in conservation. They're putting stuff out all the time for that. So follow along, as well as follow us at Antler Feather Co. at Instagram. Same thing, YouTube, as well as Facebook. And if you found value in the show, if you enjoyed what you learned and what you heard, I'm going to ask you, please share the show. Share it with your friends, your grandma, your girlfriend. I don't care who you share it with, but when you share the show, it allows me to keep getting great guests on the show like we had tonight. And when we have great guests with great knowledge, ultimately that is going to make you more deadly in the woods. So for Vince and Sam, this is the Antler and Feather Co. podcast. You are listening to the Antler and Feather Co. podcast.